Hello Perception Trainers people, and welcome back to another video. So if you didn't watch the last video, I highly recommend that you do that, because in that video I was talking about my personal coping mechanisms and how I realized that all of what I was doing, that all of my behaviors were coming from my conditioning with my mother and what she had expected of me and what she had wanted from me, and how that contradicted who I actually was and how I was trying to cope with that difference. So now in this video, I want to continue this exploration because this is how I realized why I continued to, no matter what I did in my life, feel like I was failing at life. So I feel like this is a really common experience, and this is actually a question I get asked a lot of the time, is this: why do I always feel like I'm doing the wrong thing? Why do I always feel like I'm not living the life that I'm supposed to be living? Why do I always feel like I'm not living my purpose? Why do I always feel like I'm failing, like I'm doing life wrong, like there's something wrong with me, and what I'm doing is never enough, and what I'm doing is never good enough, and it doesn't seem to matter what I achieve or what I don't achieve, if I take a rest, if I don't take a rest, I always just feel like I'm failing. And the second thing is this existential dread that we all have when we get quiet and we get still with ourselves. I feel that, especially for me, I'm just going to speak from my experience, but I feel that this is a common experience, that we feel that sense of just, I'm dying, or I'm losing it. There's not enough time. I'm not going to get it done. I'm dying, and I just want to kind of, like I say, I'm going to speak from my experience, and I hope that it resonates with your experience, and I hope that you can find some help and some similarity in your experience and my experience. So, like I said, as I was growing up, and I think more what I would like to start with was when I really started to work on myself, to start to look into why I was the way that I was, and looking into wanting to heal and wanting to grow and wanting to change. And it's kind of funny too, because in my life, I don't know that ever started, because I was a Christian for my entire life, and we were Christian because I started asking questions about God essentially as soon as I could start talking. And why is life like this? So my personal experience with why am I like this? Why is life like this? What is the meaning of all of this? Why is all of this happening? That was innate to my character from the very beginning of my life. So being a Christian and filtering everything through the Christian church, and this is just God's will and all these things, I was never satisfied with those answers. I got a lot of answers from the church that this is just God's will, and the painful things that are happening to you are a test, and God is just testing you. So when you're struggling with your friends and you're struggling with your mom and you're in all this pain, it's just a test of your faith. It's just a test of, are you going to still be a Christian? And that never really did it for me. I was like, okay, but that doesn't solve it. That doesn't make any sense to me. And this is just God's will. We couldn't possibly know. This is just what God does, and we can't question it. And you need to just trust that it's all working out for a good reason. That also, I just was never able to accept that. So I started feeling like, no, there has to be a reason. There has to be a solution. There has to be understanding here. And again, with my health issues, I started to see my health issues aren't just a test. It's these things are happening because of the foods that I'm eating. And when I change my diet, I feel better. So it's not just God's will that I'm sick. I can see for myself that that's not true, that there is a cause, and that it's my behavior that's causing it. And so when I kind of started to see that, when I got into the dieting, when I got into that I could change my diet and it could change the way that I was feeling, because I was chronically sick for my entire life, I kind of was like, okay, yeah, no, this answer that everything is just a mystery and we couldn't possibly know isn't true. And I can know. There are things that I can know. And so that was the beginning of that. And then I started getting into reading Martha Beck and with the eating disorder stuff and wanting to heal my mind with that. So afterwards, really getting into, like I say, Martha Beck work, really getting into spirituality outside of Christianity, because my initial sort of I'm done being anorexic now all coincided with me moving away from my hometown, moving out of my house for the first time. We stopped going to church. I really just realized Christianity wasn't fulfilling it for me, that everyone in my church was still just as miserable 10 years since we got there. So this was about 10 years after we had moved to Calgary and started going to the church that we went to for 10 years while we lived in Calgary, that they all had the same problems and they weren't getting better and things weren't changing. And it just seemed to me that Christianity wasn't working. Like, that was just kind of, they're not happy, it's not working, they don't have answers. And I do seem to be able to get some answers that they're not getting. So that was I'm going to leave Christianity, and I started getting into New Ageism and fairy cards and psychics and readings, and all of these things were happening. And I was just really searching and looking for, why am I like this? What is the reason for this? There has to be more than just it's God's will or something we couldn't possibly know. And then even beyond that, the kind of magical elements of New Age spirituality, of just fairies and spirits and the planets and all of these things. I'm not wanting to say to anyone that that's not real, and if that really resonates with you, okay. But for me, it was still just like, no, there has to be more of a practical reason for the pain that I'm in than just the planets are doing something. And it's not to say that I'm not saying that we're not affected by the planets. I'm not saying that we are. I'm just saying, for me, again, that just the answer just wasn't good enough. It didn't give me enough. Okay, but what can I do about it then? I just couldn't be okay with it's just what's happening. So I'm looking, and I'm really convinced in my head and in my heart for my entire life that I can explain why everything is happening to me. There has to be a reason why everything is happening. I don't believe that anything is random. I don't believe that anything is just happening. It's happening for a reason. And if I can figure out the reason, I can change the conditions. That was always the feeling. And so being a codependent, my kind of immature view of that was, I'm going to blame everything on myself. I'm going to look for how I'm the reason for all of my pain, how I'm the reason for how everything is messed up. And that was what I was doing with my mom and with my friends. It was like, I'm not being there for them enough, so they're mean to me. I'm not productive enough. I'm too emotional. I'm all of these things. And that is the reason why all of the pain is happening to me. This is why they're treating me the way that they're treating me. I was over empathizing with them, under empathizing with myself. Seeing myself as the perpetrator of all the pain in my life. And that was really intense, and I was working through that. And like I say, it was giving me some form of empowerment to feel like it was my fault. Like, my mom is treating me this way because of me, because I'm too emotional, because I'm too strong, because I'm too harsh with her. I'm all of these things. But there was never any onus on her or on anyone else. It was all just me. I would take the blame for everything, and that was how I was empowering myself. So that's the codependent way of empowering yourself. Now that I see that. Whereas the narcissistic way of empowering yourself is, none of this is my fault. It's all everyone else. So if I'm in pain, I blame it on somebody. I project it onto somebody. I expect someone to fix it for me, to meet my needs that I don't understand, or all of these things, and all that was it. So that's kind of like the mirror image. And I started to see that being a codependent is just the mirror image of a narcissist, where you believe your pain is going to go away by taking responsibility for everything, by blaming everything on yourself and thinking, if I just make myself perfect, I will be out of pain. And the narcissistic view is, everyone else around me needs to be perfect for me, and needs to provide for me, and needs to give to me, and that is what will make me happy. And it's this codependent cycle that we're all in as humans. But so, like I say, I started to get to this feeling of like, I'm on it, I'm changing my life, and I'm starting to be my real self. So we moved away. I moved to the coast. So I'm moving on with my life, right? I'm starting to get into yoga. I'm getting into life coaching. I'm getting into all of these things that actually like really resonate with me and had nothing to do with my childhood. And I'm starting, like I say, to live my own life. And then even further than that, when I really started to get into working for Young and Raw and being a holistic nutritionist online, and then we started traveling the world, and then we started living in Asia, and we started doing all these things, there was a part of me that was feeling better and better and better every time I did that. That, of course, I was aligning with my true self, with my real, authentic personality, with my actual wants, my actual needs. I was starting to come to terms with the things that I actually wanted and that I actually needed. And that was, again, part of the reason I was being able to let go of my eating disorder behaviors and my workaholism behaviors, because I was starting to see, again, this mom conditioning that I have to be productive all the time and working all the time and serving other people all the time. And the whole point of me is to be good for other people. And so, of course, I'm a workaholic. Of course, I need an eating disorder. I'm trying to make myself smaller. I'm trying to make myself disappear. All of these things. I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that. And I'm working through it, and things are getting better, and things are getting better. But, like I said, as much as I started to really face what I wanted from my life. So I wanted to live abroad. I wanted to work online and not work a 9 to 5 and do all of these things. And like I say, I was following my path. And in the back of my head, and when I got quiet, there was just this constant drumbeat of like, you're not good enough. This is not right. You're doing the wrong thing. You're failing. And I could always project it, right? That I didn't have a huge following. I don't have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I should be helping so many more people, and I'm not. I'm bad at marketing. I always had a reason that I could say, I'm just failing, and here's why I feel that way. I'm not doing good enough, and here's why I feel that way. Because I'm not selling books. I'm not on Oprah. I'm not as successful as I could be, as I should be. And it was easy for me. So once I stopped scapegoating it onto my body, I started to scapegoat the not good enough, the not productive enough, this constant feeling of not being good enough. I started scapegoating it onto my work and onto my career and how I was never good enough in that way. And even just in my lifestyle, I was feeling guilty for having nice things. I was feeling guilt. So that was the other thing too, is growing up, and from kind of 14 to the time we moved to Asia, so probably around 26, 27, I was someone who was constantly hustling. I worked 2 or 3 jobs. I was going to school. I was burning myself out, burning the candle at both ends, completely codependent with my husband, did everything in our household for him. I cooked, I cleaned, I organized everything for us. I didn't ever expect anything from him. All of my friendships were based around what I was producing and giving to this other person. So there was a part of me, like I say, that had the eating disorder stuff and all this because I was coping with the fact that I was not a human. I was not letting myself be a person. I was trying to be a service machine. I was trying to be a workaholism machine. But that made me feel good on another level. The when I had a day off, when I had a rest, when I had a break, especially back in the Vancouver days, I would just feel like I was going to die. When I had a day off and I didn't have anything to do, I felt like I was going to die. So I would like live for my day off. I'm working so hard. I'm working my 2 jobs. I'm going to school. I'm getting all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the bills paid. I'm saving money. I'm doing all these things. I'm being responsible. I'm completely taking care of myself. And I get a day off and I'm looking forward to that day off. And then I get there and I feel like I'm going to die. And I feel like, holy shit, this is the worst thing ever. I don't want a day off, and I just want to go back to work. And that was something that was there for the whole time. And then, like I say, I'm moving forward. I'm learning to rest. I'm learning to meditate. I'm learning to slow down. I'm doing all these things. And I still just feel like I'm going to die. And then, like I say, I get to this point where I have set up my business enough, and I've set up my lifestyle enough that I don't need to be working all the time. And I don't need to be being productive all the time. And I can be completely responsible for myself and have enough money and have enough provision, and we're the perfect balance of learning how to minimize our lifestyle enough so that we don't have a lot of lifestyle maintenance things, like we don't have a car, we don't have a lot of things that we own, we rent Airbnbs, we don't have the yard upkeep, the kids, all the things that other people have. So therefore I definitely have time on my hands. And like I say, I can work a reasonable amount now and have enough money to be supported. And so I all of a sudden had all this free time where I don't need to be working. I don't need to be striving. I don't need to be grinding because it's enough. I have enough. And that, like I say, opened the door to really seeing that, like, okay, I was continually telling myself the reason you feel like shit is because you're not accomplished enough. You're not big enough. You're not doing enough. You're not successful enough. You should be trying harder. You should be working harder. This information is important and you need to be getting it out and all these things. And I started to question that story. And like I say, there was just this constant feeling, no matter what I did, that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't achieving it. This wasn't good enough. I was failing. I should be doing more. I should be doing something different. And that feeling of like I'm gonna die, like I'm just feeling so scared that I'm gonna die. And I didn't really know where that was coming from until I started to look at my conditioning from my father. So when I started to, like I say, really look into the mom thing, and I've been processing that for a really long time and all these things, I was really seeing how so much of my behavior was based on the conditioning from her. What I wasn't seeing was all of the conditioning that I got from my dad that was driving my behavior. So again, I started to come to this place of realizing that I have these negative thoughts about myself. This, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not doing enough, you're not being enough, you're not producing enough, you're not productive enough, you're not famous enough, you're not helping enough people. It doesn't matter what you do, it's never enough. And that feeling that I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. And a lot of the time in the spiritual world, and I think the other thing too that I really want to mention is that addiction to work that I had, that addiction to productivity, I can't shut my thoughts off. When someone doesn't understand, so this was another big thing that I really struggled with and still struggle with and I'm working on, is this feeling of if someone doesn't understand me, if someone doesn't understand my teachings, if someone doesn't understand my videos, if I wasn't clear enough and I feel like I didn't say it perfect and someone doesn't understand, that I would get into this like intense, crazy fear mode where I just like couldn't handle that. Like I had to explain it to everyone. I had to get to this place where everyone had to be understanding me. And I couldn't rest and I couldn't have peace and I couldn't be okay if I felt like someone didn't understand me, didn't understand the teaching, didn't understand what I was saying, that I was questioning me if I was wrong or right. And I would get to the place of like, okay, no, I know that I'm right. I know what I'm saying is true because it's true for me. But I can't rest unless everyone knows that I'm right. And this was something that my mom always accused me of. She's like, you just want to be right all the time. You just have to be right all the time. And I kept thinking, like, is that an ego thing? Is that a pride thing that I can't be okay if people don't know that I'm right, or if people think that I'm wrong, or if they're questioning me? And like I say, even if I know that I'm right, because in my experience, I know that whatever I did actually improved my life and it made things better for me. And I don't need someone to tell me whether or not I'm doing the right thing, because I can feel in my own life that I'm doing the right thing. There was still this sense of like, yeah, but if people don't agree with me, and if people don't understand, and if people don't know, and if what I'm saying isn't being taken properly, and if it's not helping other people change their lives, it's not real, or it's not valid for some reason, or I'm not valid, and there was just like really this sense too of really seeing in my own self that I couldn't have peace unless I felt like everyone understood me. And I felt like everyone understood what I was understanding, and I had passed it on properly. And it was just very psychotic when I really kind of stepped back and looked at it. This feeling of never good enough, this feeling of it doesn't matter what I do, it's not enough. If I get to a place where I'm resting and I don't have to be working, I feel like I'm going to die, and that's really scary, and I don't want to take a break. I just want to be working all the time. But when I'm working all the time, I'm crazy. And the last big thing of, if people don't understand me, I feel like I'm going to die. And it was that, really, that when I sit with, when people don't understand me, I feel like I'm going to die. When I'm alone, I feel like I'm not good enough. Is this ego? Is this pride? Is this, why can't I feel safe and secure, even though I'm safe and secure? I can see that I have enough money. I can see that I'm provided for. I can see that I'm okay. I can see that I'm safe, but I don't feel safe. I feel like I'm going to die. I can see that my career is good enough. This is good enough. It's making me money. I'm continually growing. I'm getting to express everything that I want to express. I don't have to censor myself in any way. I get to be completely, fully who I am. Even if the whole world decides that they don't like this material and they don't like this content, I could get another job. I'm not dependent on this. I can see that. I'm an adult. I could figure something else out. And I started to see that, like, my neuroses, my fear that I'm not good enough, my fear that I don't have enough, my fear that I'm not doing enough, my fear that if people don't understand me, that I have to be really upset about that, wasn't real. It wasn't real in real reality. It was a fantasy. It was a psychosis. And like I said, I was like, okay, so is this ego? Is this all of these things? And what I started to realize, again, like I said, was that the true root of all of this was actually the conditioning that I got from my father. Because his value system and his way of being, first things first, it was drilled into my head that as a child, if you become an adult and you rely on your parents for money, you are the worst thing in the world. Because he just really had this opinion of adult children who were asking their parents for money as being just lazy, weak, horrible, terrible people. So I literally, now that I'm looking back on my own, how did I get here? Started working when I was 12 and saving money. And like I say, I babysat every Friday and every Saturday for my entire childhood, from 12 to 16 until I was allowed to get a real job, to save money. And I didn't ever spend my money. I never spent it on anything. I didn't buy myself stuff. My parents at some point found thousands of dollars in my little bunny piggy bank in my room and were like, well, we have to open you a bank account. You can't just keep this money in the house. And then I got a job when I was 16, started paying for my own food. And then when we moved out when I was 20, I was trying to go to ballet school, so I never actually went to post-secondary because I knew that my parents couldn't afford it. They hadn't put away money for both me and my sister to go to university. Sam was going to university, so I just said, okay, I'll pay for my own school. And then I was starting to go to ballet school, and then I just realized I wasn't going to be able to have a job and go to school at the same time, and at the same time pay for myself. So that was the thing too, is my sister and I moved out in 2010 to 2009, and she was going to school, and my dad had purchased an apartment for us, and he was really stressed about the money and really feeling like paying for this apartment was too much, paying for my sister's school was too much. So I just said, okay, you know what? I'm going to completely take me off of the table. I told him I was going to pay for rent. I told him I'd pay half the electricity. I was going to pay for my own food. And so I ended my dance school career because I couldn't make enough money to support myself and pay for all these things at the same time. I started working, and then eventually we moved to Vancouver. And like I say, I just worked 2 and 3 jobs and continued to go to school because I knew I wanted to better myself. I knew I wanted a better career. I wanted to be more helpful. I wanted to be more productive. I didn't want to just work these entry-level jobs, but I didn't have an education. I didn't have any qualifications or credentials to work higher-level jobs. So I was going to nutrition school at night. I was taking life coaching courses. I was starting to work for Young and Raw. I started to build myself in this career, and that's what I was doing. But I did it all on my own. I refused to ask for any money. I refused to ask for any help because it had been trained into me from very, very young that you just don't do that. And I remember, like I say, very, very early on with my health conditions and seeing that food made a difference, but healthy food was more expensive. So I would go grocery shopping with my dad, and if the budget was if we spent more than $200 on food for a week, he would get stressed out. So I, like I said, just started using my babysitting money to buy the food that I needed that went beyond $200. And then I got a job at the health food store so I could get a discount on the food that I needed for myself so that my dad wouldn't have to pay for it. And that was just really drilled into me. Second thing, it was really drilled into me that big, loud, opinionated women, he didn't like that. He liked women who were quiet and calm, and this is kind of like a generational thing in my dad's family of just, we don't talk about stuff. We don't talk about the elephant in the room. It's all about making everything look nice. We're polite, we don't complain, we don't have emotional outbursts, we don't do any of that. And me as a person, very emotional. Absolutely no capacity to shut down my emotions. No capacity to pretend that things are fine when they're not. So failing my dad on that. Failing being who he wanted me to be in that way. And knowing that I was never going to be able to be good enough for that. And then the last big important thing. So the always being responsible for yourself, taking care of yourself, never asking for anything from everybody. That was my modus operandi. I never wanted help. I wanted to do everything by myself and just do everything perfectly and to provide for myself and never ask for money and never ask for help and never ask for support and always be able to give support but never ask for it, because that's how my dad trained me to be a good person. That's what a good person is. And then this big kicker of if people don't understand me, I feel like I'm going to die. I didn't understand why that was such a trigger. Now, if you haven't already done so, I highly recommend that you look into Pete Walker's CPTSD work. So what I have come to realize is that intense emotional reaction that I have had and still have when people don't understand me, when I'm expressing something about my own pain or my own journey and I'm either told that I'm wrong or they don't understand and they're like, you need to explain this better to me, I don't understand what you're saying, and I just get completely psychotic trigger, like I have to explain it to them. I will wake up in the middle of the night and type out these huge long responses to people because I just feel like I have to explain myself and I have to get them to understand, and every single person that doesn't understand, it's like this big huge deal. I started to realize that that's a trigger. I'm in what Pete Walker calls a flashback when you're the post-traumatic stress syndrome. Is you hear we know this from war veterans. They hear a car backfire and it sends them back as though they're in Vietnam in the war right now, and their nervous system acts like they're in the war right now. And I was starting to see that, like, okay, that's what's happening to me. My emotional reaction to someone on the internet not understanding what I'm saying, and my emotional reaction of like, I now feel like I have to explain it to them and I cannot be okay, I cannot sleep, I cannot have peace until they understand me, that emotional reaction doesn't match the actual circumstance. So I started to be like, okay, this is something else. This isn't what this really is. Because I was completely convinced that it makes sense that if someone doesn't understand you, you flip out. But now, like I say, I started to get to the point of like, this emotional reaction doesn't make sense. My emotional reaction to when I have time off and I don't have anything to do and I feel like I'm going to die, it doesn't make sense because I'm not actually in danger. My emotional reaction to when I need help from somebody, and there's people around me who are perfectly willing to give me help, and that it's not going to cost me anything. My emotional reaction doesn't match reality. And I started to just really see that my emotional reactions weren't matching reality. And my fear that I was never doing good enough and I wasn't enough and I'm not enough and I'm in pain and I think I'm going to die, that also doesn't match reality, because I do have enough. I have enough money. I know I'm helping people. I know that this work is serving people. Of course it could always be bigger, but like, I'm 30 years old. Why do I have to be on Oprah today? Like, what is this huge drive that I have to be saving the entire world right now? Otherwise I can't feel okay. And that was, right, it started to just be like, okay, this is psychosis. This isn't normal. This isn't reasonable. This isn't rational. This isn't an emotional reaction to what's actually happening. And so I started to say, okay, so where did this come from? Why do I feel like this? And this predated, like I said, my work. I never felt good enough as a child. I never felt good enough ever. This didn't start with perception trainers. So I'm scapegoating it onto that right now. But if it happened before that, it couldn't be this. This happened before dieting. So, okay. So I really started to see, okay, where is this coming from? And like I say, I started to recognize that a huge part of what was happening in my life was that I was not living up to the conditioned expectations of my father. I am, for all intents and purposes, his worst nightmare in a lot of ways. I am everything that he told me not to be, in the sense that I am incredibly emotional. I can't pretend that things are fine when they're not. I have needs, and I needed to be provided for. I needed him to spend extra money on me. I have gifts, and I needed time to grow them and develop them in a safe environment where I was being supported. And I didn't get that because I felt like I had to provide for myself as soon as possible. And so constantly feeling like I wasn't good enough and I wasn't doing the right thing and all these things. Next thing, his value system was around family. Like, he really had an expectation that I was going to grow up, get married, live in the same town as him, have kids that we would all go over on Sundays and watch the game, and he would hang out with my husband and play with the grandkids, and that he would have the life that his parents had, because that was kind of what his parents did. Is when my sister and I were born, my dad and my mom and us, we spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and their retirement was filled with grandkids and just hanging out with the kids and hanging out with the grandkids, and it was this validation that my grandparents were worthy people because their kids liked them and their kids took care of them and all these things. And seeing that me moving away, me living this lifestyle, is completely not what he wanted. And he never necessarily spoke this to me, but it's a very much a assumed thing that that's what he wanted. And so every single day that I'm living this life, I'm not doing what my dad wanted me to do. I am fundamentally in my personality. And that's the other thing, the next thing. He's a conservative kind of baby boomer generation guy with conservative values. And I am a millennial with liberal values. Like, at the end of the day, I really believe in social welfare. I really believe in climate change and that we should be working to reduce that there should be a carbon tax. We shouldn't be using fossil fuels. There should be a punishment, a monetary punishment for doing these things that are destroying the planet. And I am perfectly willing to sacrifice having a car and sacrifice all these things and make my life harder to be environmentally friendly. And that's not in his wheelhouse at all. And like I say, I'm really into emotions and let's talk about what's really going on and all of these things. And so I'm just like, I'm starting to come to this realization that a huge part of the reason I have always felt like no matter what I do, I'm doing it wrong, is because there's a part of me, a conscious part of me, that's living in alignment with my true values, that's living in alignment with true reality, that's doing the right thing as far as true reality is concerned. But it is absolutely the wrong thing as far as my conditioning is concerned. And this, again, is where the nervous system comes in. That my nervous system is programmed, like every other person's nervous system, to do what my caregivers wanted me to do, because as a child, I was completely victim to them. As a child, I could not provide for myself. I could not, if my dad didn't like who I was, I couldn't just go find another dad to provide for me. If my mom didn't like who I was, I couldn't just go find another mom to love me. If my parents rejected me and they decided not to provide for me, which they did in many, many ways. They provided for me base needs physically, but mentally and emotionally, and also with my sickness and stuff, they didn't provide for me because they found me to be a nuisance. And they were irritated with my emotions, and my body was too much, and all of it was too much. And me not being who they wanted me to be was killing me. If I hadn't stepped in and started to take responsibility for my own health and my own life at 14, I probably would be dead right now. And this is just the bottom line of it. I was a victim to them until I was able to be old enough to start to provide for myself. And so that's wired into my nervous system. That those traumas that I faced as a child, where I needed something and they didn't provide it for me, and it was because they were rejecting me, therefore being rejected equals not getting love, equals not safe, that's wired into my nervous system. It wasn't my ego. It was never that I was just bad, or that there were these dueling parts of me. The one part of me that wanted so badly to be what my mom wanted me to be, that wanted so badly to be what my dad wanted me to be, and didn't even see that that's what that was. The more clearer way of saying this is this. I have been working to be my real true self since I was 14, to embrace myself and to be my true self. And what I'm discovering more and more and more as I grow is that who I really am is fundamentally not who my parents wanted me to be. It's fundamentally what gets me rejected by them. And that is true in reality. What they told me was wrong and bad about what makes a person good and bad. I am a lot of the things that they think make a person bad. I'm a loud, emotional, outspoken, liberal hippie who moved away and doesn't want to be providing for everybody all the time. And that is completely against my conditioned programming of this is what a good person is. So as much as I'm consciously aware that I don't want to be like my dad and I don't want to live his values and all of those things are stupid to me or whatever, my nervous system, every single day, I don't do what I know has been programmed into me to be the right thing in my childhood, in my conditioning. My nervous system is kicking over and telling me you're going to die because you're not being who you're supposed to be for their approval. My nervous system hasn't caught up to the fact that I am an adult now who can provide for myself. I don't need my parents' approval in order to get my needs met. That was the condition of my childhood. And then the devastating thing was realizing that I am never going to be who my parents want me to be. I was never, ever, ever going to get their approval. And I didn't fully realize that. And I haven't fully processed this, so I'm still in the process of this. But I'm really recognizing that so much of me doing what was right for me and living in true alignment and true pleasure has been causing this backlash this entire time that I've been doing it. Of you're doing life wrong, you're doing life wrong, you're doing life wrong, you're gonna die. Because my nervous system is programmed that everything that I'm doing is out of alignment with what my parents wanted from me, what my parents approved of, and my nervous system is still stuck in if they reject me, I'm gonna die. So it's not ego. It's not that there are these dueling parts of me. Because that was the other thing too, is like watching me sabotage myself. I would sabotage myself. I would really want to like share my story and be loud and be proud and be like out on the internet and like just share my story. And I just like wouldn't do it. And I would just shut myself down. Anytime I was starting to get some success, I would sabotage myself. And I would just be like, what? If I'm thinking that this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, why do I keep sabotaging myself? Why do I keep ruining this for me? Why do I keep throwing myself under the bus? Why do I keep getting obsessed with these things that aren't important and convincing people and all this? And I finally started to see that it was because it's my conditioning, my nervous system that thinks that I'm going to die if I keep doing what I'm doing right now because it's not going to be approved of by my parents. That's driving the show the other half of the time. So I'm really starting to just see that these two parts of myself, the ego and my real self, the ego didn't come from nowhere. It's my conditioning. It's what I was raised to believe is right and what I have to do to be provided for in the victim state of my childhood. So as I've been doing what's actually been right for me, my nervous system has been hijacking me and hijacking my emotions and telling me over and over and over again, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're not doing it right, you're not doing it right, you're not doing it right. Because I'm not aligning with my conditioning. And in my childhood, being who I really was getting me killed. That is also the big thing. The trauma that I'm reacting to now of not being understood and that equaling me dying, that happened to me. The fact that my parents didn't understand what was going on with me, they didn't understand what was going on with me physically. My dad did not understand what was going on with me in my relationship with mom and how I wasn't getting my needs met and how I was overwhelmed at school and how all of these things that were happening to me were actually happening to me and were really hurting, and I needed to be rescued and I needed to be saved and I needed to be understood in my childhood, in my child victim state where I couldn't make things better for myself. I needed my parents to understand what was going on with me, to help me work through my pain, and they didn't. I was dying because of that. I almost physically died because they didn't understand that I was sick. And so now I can see why the trigger of someone not understanding me feels like an emergency. Because in my childhood victim state, not being understood did mean I was dying. Did mean my dad didn't rescue me from my mom. Did mean my parents didn't understand that I was physically sick and get me the help that I needed. They didn't understand me. I couldn't explain myself enough for them to understand me. And so I was trapped in pain. And that got wired into my nervous system, that as a trauma. So now I understand the inner child of us, the inner child parts of us are really, again, the parts of ourselves that are stuck in this child circumstance. So this is why, again, I say I have no problem saying I was a victim, because as a child, I was. It's not like when you're an adult and you're in an abusive relationship and you could choose to leave and you just don't. Even that, I still can't blame people who do that because I know it's their nervous systems now. Our programming is just trying to keep us safe, and we are in such a state of chaos and fear and ignorance and not knowing why we're so scared and why we do what we do and why we stay with the abusive husband and all of these things, that I have no capacity to blame anyone anymore for the choices that they make, because it's not really a choice they're making. Their nervous system is overdriving. So this is what I understood about myself now, is that this is just how the nervous system evolved. That when I wasn't getting my needs met as a child, I was dying, and that's true. And as a child, I did not have the capacity to understand what I needed to get my needs met, outside my parents. They had to understand me in order to rescue me. And because they didn't, I didn't get rescued, and I was dying because of it. And that is absolutely true. So now, as an adult, I can understand my own needs. I can work to get my own needs met. I can make it so that it doesn't matter if anyone in the world understands me. My pain, I can deal with it on my own if I can understand it and I can get my need met. But even that, in order to understand my pain and to get my need met, has required so much understanding what my conditioning was that was telling me it's not okay to have these needs. You're not allowed to want this. It's not okay to be this kind of person. So, like I say, realizing that I wanted to live in Asia and I wanted to live this lifestyle that I'm living, I have felt constantly shame and like I'm gonna die this whole time because it's not what my dad wanted me to do. And that is wired into my nervous system, that if you don't do what your dad wants you to do, if you don't do what your providers want you to do, they're gonna reject you, they're not gonna provide for you, and then you're gonna die. So even though I'm in a position now where I'm not dependent on him, I can see that in my conscious mind. My subconscious nervous system cannot see that. I would get triggered into a state of fear. When I'm not understood, it triggers this feeling, I'm not going to be understood and I'm going to die. Because that's what happened in my childhood. That really did happen to me. Not being able to be a provider got me rejected. And therefore, I was dying. I wasn't getting my needs met. And that is really actually true. Being loud and emotional and all these things that my parents didn't like made them reject me, made them not spend time with me, made them not help validate what was going on with me. Therefore, I was stuck in pain and I couldn't get myself out. I shouldn't have been going to school. That's like the big thing. There were just so many needs that I had as a kid that just did not get met because I was not understood. And I could not meet those needs for myself as a child. And I now as an adult is conditioned into me that to need those things is wrong and bad because it's a hindrance to my parents. And I also had this really deep feeling of no one ever chooses me. That if it's ever you get to spend time with this person, or if we're in a fight and I'm saying this person is hurting me and they're saying, yeah, but she's hurting me, no one ever takes my side. Again, that was my dad. He just always chose my mom. Just whenever there was a conflict between me and my mom, he would always just be like, okay, it's you, Alyssa, you have to stop. You're making your mother upset, stop it. It never was, maybe you need something. Maybe you're not getting your need met. Maybe you're being abused. Maybe you are not the problem, but you're expressing a problem. It was always my fault. So now I can see that's what I believed about myself. That's what I believed about life. And no wonder I've been feeling so crazy because I've been rebelling against my conditioning without actually healing that trauma. So I've been living my real, authentic life and feeling like it's the wrong thing and like I'm going to die the whole time because my nervous system is saying you're doing the wrong thing based on your conditioning. Your dad and your mom are not going to approve of you and you're going to die because that's what happened in your childhood. So this is what I wanted to say. There's no ego. There's no bad part of us. We're not sabotaging ourselves for no reason. We don't feel like we're not doing good enough and like we're gonna die and like there's not enough time and all these things for no reason. It's our conditioning. We've been conditioned that this is how we have to live, and so much of that conditioning is out of alignment with truth. It isn't real reality. It's what we needed to be for our parents to approve of us, but it's not who we really are. So what we had to do in our childhood to be provided for was against true life, in that we had to reject our real selves. And that is painful, and that is death. And now in adult life, we have to start to embrace real, true reality. We're no longer victims. We're no longer in that victim state where our parents decide for us if we're provided for or not. But we have to grow up out of that and to see that it's not about getting other people to approve of us. It's not about getting other people, our parents, anyone, to agree with us and to tell us what's right and wrong. It's about us learning how to figure out what's right and wrong for ourselves. And I'm going to talk about this all in the next video, okay? So this whole nervous system deprogramming and all this stuff, I'm going to talk about it in the next video. But I just wanted to, again, illustrate that for me, I just realized that it didn't matter how much I was living in alignment with my real true self. I was always going to feel like I was going to die and like I was doing it wrong until I started to actually deprogram myself from my childhood conditioning and to see what my conditioning was and why there were these seemingly two parts of me. This one part of me that will never let myself rest no matter how much I see that it drives me physically into the ground. Why can't I rest? Because I was told from the very beginning, if you're not providing for yourself, you're going to die. You have to always be working. You have to always be striving. Never be lazy. Never, ever, ever rely on anyone else. And when you're not working, you're lazy and you're sloppy. And that was just the conditioning from my dad. So I took that on and that was just my life. And I never questioned it. And the you have to be understood. If people don't understand you, if consensus reality isn't agreeing with you, you're going to die. That's the scariest thing in the world. It's not true in my reality now. Literally, everyone can disagree with me that my diet is the right diet. Everyone can tell me that I'm wrong, and it doesn't change reality. If I'm getting good results, I'm getting good results. Everyone can disagree with me, and it doesn't take away my good results. But still feeling like if people disagree with me, there was this crazy sense that like, then it's not real. It's not real until everyone validates it. And that was because in my childhood, when I wasn't validated, I didn't get what I needed. In my childhood, I couldn't say, I needed my parents to understand me so that they could do for me what I needed. Now, as an adult, I can understand myself and give it to me. But in my childhood, not being understood meant not getting my needs met, meant dying. And that was true. So now I have a CPTSD trigger that when someone doesn't understand me, it triggers the you're going to die. I just go straight to that because that's my nervous system. It's programmed into my nervous system. Because again, that's how conditioning works. When we're young children dependent on our parents and we're simple, we don't understand how the world works, we can't meet our own needs, the only way to survive is to get your parents to approve of you. To have them not approve of you, to have them not understand you, is to not get your needs met, and it is to die, to be dying, to be in pain. And so we are now wired that provision and everything comes from the outside because that's how it was in our childhood, and we never moved on from that. Now all of us are in this nervous system trigger all the time of just trying to be what our parents wanted us to be, trying to get other people to approve of us so that they will meet our needs either in a codependent or narcissistic way, right? We're trying to get our needs met being codependents by providing for other people and being what they want us to be and not making them upset and not being who other people want us to be so that they will approve of us and therefore we feel like we're going to get our needs met. Or we're narcissistic and we're manipulating others into meeting our needs through blaming them and shaming them and guilting them and manipulating them because again, it's just two sides of the same coin. I can't get my needs met on my own. You have to do it for me. So either I'm going to get it met through pleasing you or I'm going to get it met through manipulating you. And it's not different. And neither of these two things are evil. This is why I'd say I don't believe in evil people. I don't believe narcissists are evil. They only know how to get their needs met through manipulation because that's how they were raised. You can look into their childhood and you will see that they did not get their needs met. The only way they could get their needs met was through manipulation. And so that's how they learned. And so now that's what they do. And then they find codependents who got their needs met by being good and being subservient. And then it's just this perfect match. Because none of us know how to meet our own needs. Because our nervous systems are trapped in childhood. It is a nervous system problem. We don't know how to love ourselves safe to seeing that we're adults now who can provide for ourselves. So now what I'm working on is seeing that, yeah, I can be who my dad completely disapproves of. And I'm not going to die. I can be misunderstood. And I'm not going to die. I'm working with these traumatized parts of myself. And seeing that, okay, but look, I'm an adult now. It's not true anymore. It's not true anymore. It was true. It really was. It was true when I was a child. When I could not provide for myself, when I could not make it better for myself, I didn't have control over my diet, I didn't have control over my body, I was a child, I didn't understand anything. I couldn't make my mom stop doing what she was doing. I couldn't make them understand me. I couldn't make them take me out of school and put me into a special school and do all these things. I couldn't make them do that. But now as an adult, I can. And even though I was raised to believe that a lot of who I am is wrong and bad, I can start to say, it isn't. These parts of myself are not bad. My big, loud, emotional parts are not bad. The parts of me that just want to air all the dirty laundry are not bad. The parts of me that wants to live in Asia and have liberal values and donate to charities and help people and really believe that everyone, that I can give them money and all, That's an okay thing to be. I'm allowed to be that. And I'm not going to die. And even if my dad never understands, even if my mom never understands, at this point, it's okay. They don't have to understand me for me to be okay. Because I can now provide for myself. But it's working with my nervous system that is trapped in childhood and just thinks every time I do something that's out of alignment with what my parents would want. It feels good in real pleasure, but it feels terrible in consensus reality pleasure. And seeing how addicted I have been to consensus reality approval, because to me, in my nervous system, it's wired in that approval equals provision. If people disapprove of you, you're going to die. And we all have that. And that's where it's all coming from. We are not learning from reality because we're all addicted to each other, because we never learned how to learn from reality. And like I say, I'm going to talk about this in the next video. So I just hope that the takeaway here is that everything that you're doing is for a good reason. You're conditioned to believe that a certain way is the right way, even if it hurts. And so there's consensus pleasure in that, and your nervous system is wired that that's what you're supposed to be doing. So that feeling of I'm dying and I'm doing it wrong and there's not enough time is probably coming from the degree to which you're living out of alignment with your parents' conditioning that you haven't processed, and therefore your nervous system thinks you're going to die because it still thinks you're a child who's dependent on their approval for your survival. And you're now an adult who is codependent with the world. You're probably feeling dependent on your partner and your bosses and social media and your friends to approve of you. Feeling like if everyone were to reject you, if you were to be your real self, if you were to do something that they didn't approve of, that you'll die, that you can't get your needs met. And that's valid. We all feel that way. Now we're projecting our childhood traumas onto our reality, our current reality, but it's not what's really going on now, because we are now adults who can provide for ourselves. So it's not your ego. You don't have dueling parts of yourself because there's just a part of you that's wanting to shit things up for yourself or wanting to be bad, or you don't have an inner critic that's just there for no reason. It's trying to protect you from being anything that your conditioning told you you shouldn't be, or from being, from not being anything your conditioning told you you should be. Because in your childhood, you did need to be approved of by your parents to live. And you were a victim to them. But like I say, now you're not. Things have changed. So just because you were a victim then in your childhood doesn't mean you are now. You couldn't do anything about it then, but you can do something about it now. And that's what I'm going to keep talking about in the next video. And that's what everything that we're doing in the mystery school. That's what the mystery school is about right now. It's how do we really get into this conditioning, really get into what our nervous system is wired for, really get into what our belief systems are that are just automatic and we don't even see them anymore, so that we can start to evolve ourselves into adults who can see that we don't need people to approve of us. We need to be in alignment with reality, and that our nervous systems can catch up to our adult selves who then don't rely on other people approving of us to feel safe, because we can approve of ourselves. And that's how I got here. That's why self-love is the key. I started to have compassion for myself. That's how I started. I started to validate that I felt crazy. I started to validate that everything was stressful. I started to validate that I have these coping mechanisms. And rather than blaming myself and shaming myself and trying to fix myself, the codependent route, what am I doing to cause all my pain? And why am I doing this? And what's wrong with me? Or how did I choose this? I must have chosen my parents somehow in a past life, or I did something wrong in a past life to deserve this, or whatever. Instead of any of that, just, no, this is happening for a reason and it's not my fault. I am not the reason my parents were the way they are. I am not the reason they treated me the way that they did. It was not because of me. They were like that before me. But now what happened to me and the pain that I went through and the trauma that I went through as an adult, it's not their job to fix it. It's not the world's job to fix it. It's my job to heal me. It's my job to be there for me, to validate me, to be here with me. So that's why I say there's no such thing as a negative emotion. There's no such thing as any of that. Validate everything. I have validated everything. And that is why I'm making the progress that I'm making. That's why I can see how I got where I am. And it's just my nervous system, and it's not magic. And so we'll talk about it more in the next video. But for now, just there's that. Join the Mystery School if you want more content from me. And if not, you can figure it out on your own. You don't need a school. We're just there to support each other. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.